Good day for everyone. Since I just got back from Asia, I don't even know what the time frame is. Well, thank you for everyone to joining our special event for today. Today we are not looking into the past into the educational process like what we have done. Today we are unveiling our SARA security and risk assessment. And of
Yep.
course, here with Sean Mahoney, my partner.
Hi, everybody.
And to be honest, we've been working on this for the last what 3 to 5 years already.
Yeah, yeah, easily.
Some component has been doing more than that. So today we are very excited and thank you for your time for joining us in this event. And why are we here, Sean? Do they want to spend an hour
You know,
listening to our sales pitch?
it became almost obvious to us as we were working on the cyber risk governance system and developing Sarah. When I joined you and I had left an entirely different industry, me having to spend the first several months Googling what everybody was saying because everybody spoke in acronyms. Everybody used their own language, whether they were on compliance or security or IT. They all used their own acronyms, and it became obvious that there was an issue. And we talked about how do we resolve this issue? How do we get everybody on the same page and quit using acronyms? And you and I do try to do as best we can to de-acronym our conversations when we do our conversations or we're talking to customers, especially when I'm talking to non-technical executives about our reports. And our reports, we try to remove as many acronyms as we can because it does get to be so confusing. So it was how do we get everybody on the same page? And really through that entire process, people kept asking, that's great. I see the requirements. I see the need. I see that we'll be a more secure organization. But where do we start?
Right.
What do I do?
So before we go into the meat of this, of course, we're breaking it down into the past, the
Right.
present, and the future. So for all of you that's staying for us from the next 60 minutes and have joined our or have not joined our cyber risk group, check out our group. And we have been talking about this for the last almost 2 years now
Right.
with a lot of information from subject matter experts and joining us and talk about cyber risk governance and how do we tackle it, how from an organization perspective, especially for the small mid-sized businesses that who we targeting with revenue less than $250 million. Those are our target audience because they don't have enough resource, and which we're going to talk a little bit more about, the talent shortage, the increasing of cyber attack. But what you want, why you want to stay behind is because we're going to give away one of our advisor have given us his 40 years of experience,
Right.
boil it down into a business impact analysis, which we love to give it to you and stay tuned and listening more about that. And of course, that's just one aspect of cyber security. And, there's cyber security, network security, information security. All of those we talking about these two aspect of things. One is on the technical side, and the other side is on the governance, risk, and compliance. And why we're going to be spending more time talking about this, because now the technology side, which most of you have spent a lot of money, efforts, and resources into building your cybersecurity posture and getting to the
Yeah.
point that now you're facing a new challenge with all the governance and how does it relate it to risk management and of course compliance, which will be more and more. We're going to let you know what are the new ones going to come into 2024 as well. So we broke that down just on the GRC from global, regional, local, and industrial level. How do we tackle all of them when you have a company that in multiple states in let's say in the financial area or manufacturing area, that you might have to comply with a few of those compliance and
Right.
regulatory issue with one budget. So these are the aspect of it. We're going to try to break it down and talk about why we put together this security and risk assessment, SARA, SARA, simple, and talk about how we're going to take a three-steps approach from strategic point of view, approach point of view, into tactical. And I'm sure a lot of you wanted to know, how do we tackle this? This is the part that, of course, we're going to spend a little bit more time to explain. And if not, then you can reach out to us. You can find us on LinkedIn and Cyber Risk Governance Group and connect with us. All right, Sean.
And we get the irony of SARA being another acronym for security and risk assessment. We get that, but but you need a
But to
marketing
make it
hook on
easy
this
to
stuff.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah, true. It becomes a lot to say security risk assessment multiple times in a conversation. So,
All right, back to this slide. What, why? What is the problem? It's like, tell us more.
in on both sides, both groups of stakeholders here, the technologists who are involved in your IT security, your network security, and your information security, are along with your internal auditors or your compliance people that are writing policies and procedures. They're all working to do the same thing. They're all trying to secure the organization, and they need to be able to communicate to senior management, to the executives who are not involved in the tactical side on either one of the technical side or the compliance side. And so they don't always understand the acronyms that the two groups of stakeholders use to move their work forward within their own groups of people doing the work. And so in doing this, you have non-technical executives hearing acronyms or language they're not used to working with. And so there's this battle between these two groups to get resources from the executive managements, and they're not getting the information into the right hands to make decisions to allocate budget. I'm seeing a comment here that a couple of people are still seeing event will start soon. So
Hmm.
I think we're showing we're live, right, Stanley?
Yeah, well, we're showing we are live.
Yeah.
Yep. Click to
Okay.
join.
All right. So
Okay, so
it's
go back
really
into this point about
sure.
the why are we talking about acronym battle? So this is the problem that we've been having.
Yeah.
So in my 18 years of cybersecurity experience, and those company that who n- you know I would just say there are two types of company. One to just want to check the box in compliance, right? Get
Yeah.
me the minimum, get it done so I can just pass the audit, tell the auditor we have done it, and so pass it through. And then, of course, they are company that really dive into why. What are the
Right.
problem we tackling? How can we utilize technology not just as a tool, but a way to help us to unveiling the informations we have about our organization risk? And what can we improve? How can we do it better? Not just going by throwing money into a solution or technology solutions and addressing only 20% of what they giving, what we can
Right.
get out of that tool, or 30%, depends on who. And sometimes those tools, you need to hire specialists to operating those tools. That kind of defeat the purpose at the same time. So this is the area that we need to dive deeper into, going into the new subject of data science, data analytic. How do we pull this out? And the way that we've been talking about it is just like a GPS. Back then you use maps and, to navigate into this complex and going from point A to point B. Now who needs maps, right? We just pull
Right.
out our mobile phone. It's like, okay, punch in, turn on our locations, and it will provide a suggested route, and then depends on what route you want to pick, and you just follow it, and it will provide
Yep.
the interactions, with accidents or delays, and so you can interact with it. And this is exactly what we are trying to accomplish with Sarah,
Right.
with data analytic. The first place that we try to do is, okay, we got clients coming, different size of the client in different industry coming and tell us, Stanley, what do we do? This now we got new compliance, or we got new tools recommended by, our team. Where do we go? How do we, what are those for? So this is the part that it gets, why we call it the acronym battle. Because sometimes when you're delaying that decision making process by selecting different type of tools and find out what they need, then, well, this is interesting, it pops up. Then the risk, the enterprise risk comes on, and also the cost. So yes, this is, we're going to be recording this. All right, so in need of risk mitigation, so we talk about SARA focusing on small mid-sized company. And
Right.
some people ask how small. And we tell them, look, small sometimes it doesn't mean, even though you have 20 people, but your digital assets or your financial assets has a lot more value. And not just looking at the top line or the bottom line, but in from a digital assets point of view, you have a lot of assets, or you have to comply to quite a few different regulations. For example, one of our wealth management companies, although they only have about less than 30 people,
Yep.
but they operating in California, they operating in New York and other three other states, with small team, which is great. But at the same time, that they have quite a few regulations and compliance that they have to meet. So they cannot always hire more people, even though now hiring people, it turns out to be very costly as well. And of course, with the increasing type of attack, they come to us in asking one simple question, Stanley, what are we doing in our IT? Is our IT or cybersecurity, whatever term that you want to use, meeting our compliance requirement? That was the starting point. It's just one
Yeah.
simple statement. Yeah, they might be small, but even larger size of the company, they come to us with that repeating questions. What are we doing now? 3 months, 6 months, or annually, they come to and ask the similar questions. And because the landscape keep changing, and now this year they might have to comply with FINRA, but now with the new SEC cyber rules, what kind of potential impact, what kind of risk that they need to mitigate? And then, of course, we know in the last couple of years, in the last 3 years, the cyber insurance industry itself has changed 180 degree. Why, Sean?
Yeah.
Tell.
We used to give away cyber insurance to all of our customers when they were engaged with us. It was cheap. I remember in my previous life, um, you know, I was offered cyber coverage just because I had insurance with the broker. Um, it was under different names at different times, but I always declined it. I was like, I don't need that. I'm a small business, 150 employees. I don't need that. I don't have the budget for it. Why do I need that? No, I'm not big enough. Nobody's going to want my stuff. But as we saw, insurance paid out on all the claims. A lot of people were getting hit. A lot of organizations were getting hit, and they didn't have the resources to remedy their situation. They didn't have the available cash to pay the ransom, so they went to their insurance policy. The insurance companies paid out. The insurance companies covered the cleanup and the remediation work. That got to be pretty expensive, and
And
it
not
wasn't
anymore.
keeping pace with the premiums that they were paying. And so, the insurance industry ended up sort of upside down in that area. Part of the problem was they didn't have the actuarial history like they do in benefits coverage or auto coverage or home coverage or life insurance. But they have a better idea now, and it became incredibly difficult for companies to retain cyber coverage or to get a new policy in cyber coverage in 2022 started to get complicated. 23 was difficult for a lot of companies, primarily because they started asking questions. The insurance companies did, the underwriters did, asking questions in their gathering of information about your security practices and controls. Do you do this? And on some of these documents, if you answered no anywhere on that page, you got set aside. You weren't extended coverage at all for any premium you were willing to pay.
So
And
for
so,
those who are new to us, sorry, Sean, but these
yeah,
are we have done the YouTube, and we have posted this type of recording in YouTube. So if you go into YouTube, type in NetSwitch Inc., and you'll find a list of them. And we did talk about with insurance brokers, in
yeah,
particular about this area. So we don't need to spend too much time in this particular area at this point. But and then go back into you as an B. And as a business, you have a different type of risk that associate with your existing vendors.
this is one of
And
the
it
things we're starting to see more so with the regulatory oversight. Is they're asking for third-party risk assessments of the vendor supply chains, and this is where the small and mid-sized businesses get caught. Is that they're part of a supply chain? They may be a fifth party, sixth party vendor to a large enterprise, and they're going to be set aside because they're not doing the right thing. So you're seeing from these large organizations, what kind of insufficient information do they have about their vendor supply chain? Or they have suffered a material incident. Material incident is significant enough that it has a financial impact or regulatory oversight impact to the organization that has to be covered.
right. So again, going back into why we put together SARA is to challenge the status quo.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times that customer come to us because they always looking at this as a technical problem.
Yeah,
No, it's not a
right.
technical
Not
problem
anymore.
anymore. And in fact, that technical, that as I said earlier, that you already spend a lot of money into your tool sets, and we are not here to try to sell you another tool sets, but utilizing our method and approach to start building the baseline so we can measure against your existing tool set to be operational effective and cost efficiency and increase
Hmm.
the cost efficiency with your existing resources. And challenging the status quo is something that we not deliberately try to make a sell, but it is in fact that now we talked about the compliance, we touch on the compliance, we touch on the insurance. It becomes a necessity for your organization to understand your cyber resilience maturity level in order to start addressing the operation effectiveness and the cost efficiencies. Otherwise, there is no way to find out your existing investment has any return on investment at all. And meanwhile, of course, that we know that there are more tool sets being advertised, being promoted, being pushed to your plate. And this is where we talked about it for many years, that why not utilizing some of the open source when it makes sense, and try to reduce that type of cost by using some of the you know widely used open source solutions. Like one of them we've been talking about is PF Sense. We've been utilizing this for over 15 years already, and we helped our customers to install that so that way they can utilize it as a firewall.
Yep.
It doesn't applicable to all, but this is something that why we starting with the baseline analysis with Sarah and try to change the status quo. And like what we talk about the GPS, at least that we identify where are you at as in your organization, not only your tools, but your teams and your vendors in this case. Are they following what you're asking to do? And because if they don't, this might become your company's liability, and it would trigger into the compliance and regulation penalties. So this is now we're talking about enterprise risk management, but unfortunately this is all kind of fall into one place between cybersecurity and enterprise risk management now. So with that said, we're going into, more statistics, right? So like
Yeah.
the insurance, only 20% of the less than 250 employee has the insurance. And
Yeah.
we talked about this as it was a last line of defense. Now it becomes the first line of defense. And because that, if you want to have a sustainable business, and if you want to have more, bringing in more clients, you got to have insurance. And one of our example is in manufacturing, the case studies, as a manufacturing company,
Yep.
that their customer demanding them to meet some of these type of compliance and regulatory and insurance coverage in order for them to do business with them. So of
That's
course
right.
that we didn't just get involved with the insurance part, we got involved with the compliance issues. And this is an interesting case. Sean, do you want to go into a little bit deeper into this?
With the customer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just tell us more
Yeah.
about the case study. Yeah.
So in this particular case, it was a manufacturing company. It was SMB. Um, they were asked questions as part of the evaluation process by their customer, and there were a significant number of gaps, and insurance was
64
one of
items
those
that I
gaps.
remember.
Yeah, and they were asked these questions, and they had difficulty, and the organization looked at it as a technical issue. It was a technical problem to fix.
Well, go
Um,
back into one step. They spent a year and
yeah,
a half and try to fix this. And of course, this is the management come to the point it's that they ran out of patience. And yes, like you said, Sean, they're focusing on the
yep,
technical part. And yes, they might have some policies and procedures, but after a year and a half, they try to do that on their own. And finally the management team and reach out to me, and this is another funny part. After 20 years I have not talked to that customers. 20 years later they reach out back to me. Hey, I noticed you do cybersecurity. Yeah, I've been doing that for the last 18 years. So with that
glad you
said,
listened to our conversations.
yeah, yeah, it got to attention, and which is wonderful. So this is how we engage. And the first questions that I asked the team, the existing team, internal team, what do they think that the percentage that they have comply in terms of the long list of items that requested by the customer? And they say, oh, it's about 70%. That was in the first meeting, right? And then of course when we deploy the SARA baseline, we find out they're only 26%. Okay, so this is the gap that we need to fill out. And also the expectation, not only from the management, but the customer, and going on to, of course, the internal team as well, that handling the technical as well as the governance side, and us, and their vendors, and they are globally, and they have sites in different part of the world. So this also, affecting the regional operation as well. So this
Right.
is when we starting getting engaged. We can only give them our existing project plan and outline that all those items and telling them, hey, these are the stuff that you may be able to do to reduce the cost. Of course, cost is always a big issue. So these are the items that we give in now, and tell them, like the business impact analysis that we're going to give out is something that they should able to fill out and able to come back, so we get a better idea how to provide them with a better value with
Right.
our proposal.
Right.
So with that said, it's like, okay, we expecting 70%, and of course some of them say policy procedures. We get engaged. We have our consultant, because our principal is focusing on separation of duties. And in
Right.
this particular case, it was ISO plus NIST. And based on those frameworks, their customers demand them to meet those requirements. So we have our third-party risk assessor partners. We have our ISO specialist partners to get engaged and start reviewing the policies and procedures and the processes with the third-party engagement. And we focusing on the technical part. This first, the SARA baseline, which is penetration testing, configuration assessment, vulnerability scanning, And then after we have done those tests, which are completely automated, we just send them an appliance, or we ask them to acquire their own appliance up to themselves, but they choose to use ours, so we ship it to them. In And then we adding a what we call a jump box to make sure that none of the data will be even include our test, including us. They have full control of it. We don't get to see them until they release it to us. So we don't see any of the pen test or vulnerability scanning or the configuration assessment result until they allow us to go through that jump box and pull those results. So with that said, this is why we look at it as an unbiased vendor agnostic baseline assessment. And I know that most of you are still engaging with pen tester, and we stopped doing that. Of course, we have our pen testers to do the evaluations and making sure whatever we get from the automated pen tests done are up to what the customer's requirements, what they need. But at the same time, that we reduce a lot of time. And last month alone, we could able to perform 3 different pen tests, and able to get them complete within a month, because the automation tools is just accessible
Yep.
now and is cost effective. And it's just like when I started 18 years ago, vulnerability scanning software wasn't even a thing. Of course, I'm old, right? So back then we have to do the manual process, just like penetration testing, with existing, a lot of pen tester going through. And I taught with some of the universities and asked them, why do you want to be a pen tester anymore, when that kind of tools, automated tool, is replacing. Of course there's value to be a pen tester, but that's not the point. But the market is shrinking because the automation tool, the AI, is coming out. Now we need to be more specific, more focused. Let the tool set run its things, get the result, and now we analyze it, which is the last step of our baseline, is to compare with the GRC. What is the company's governance requirement? What are the potential risks being identified from those gap analysis? So it could be human resource as a risk. And then the third part, of course, is the compliance. Going back in this particular case, I mentioned that there were 64 items that needs to complete in 6 months. We gave out that time frame. We know that exactly in 6 months that we were able to deliver that because we have done it long enough. But of course, a lot of times that it also involve internal resources, third party vendors. And that is the part that is hard to control. So once we get engaged, we give them a project plan, identify what they can do, and they tell us what they can do and cannot do. Give us all the policies and procedures. We have our consultant, separation of duties to review those policies and procedures, because we are the technologists. We might need to have some type of change in the policies and procedures. So we don't want to be, get ourselves into the bias situations. And at the same time, the third party analysis, going back into the whole revenue, vendor risk type of there. So we went into that path as well.
The
So,
important thing about this particular case, Stanley, was that even as we got engaged, the IT still really wanted to keep their hands on this, and it took a little while, but eventually they all realized the executive management and the IT realized that it was going to require more than just IT, and they brought in legal and HR and the data science people, and it really got involved in a lot of different areas so they could understand this was an organizational effort, not a technology effort. And in this example here, the skills in just your technical side to address these things is getting more and more difficult for the small and mid-sized enterprise. And that's where we start to come in this automation and the AI tools to help facilitate and close that gap, because the skills just aren't there in the organization. They can't afford them because they're being sucked into all the large enterprise that have the large revenue and budgets to afford these people now.
and again, thank you, Sean, to pointing that out. And again, the technology side, you get more different type of attack, and now ransomware becomes triple ransomware, triple exploitation ransomware attack, or
Hmm.
multiple exploitations from the same attack. And then, of course, on the other side, you get more and more governance and compliance requirements, and like what I addressed earlier. So this is the part that where we know there's a talent shortage. Has not even changed in the last 5 years. It's
Yeah.
going from 3.8 to 4 million, globally. In this country alone, is already 500,000, and it goes up and down within that half a
Yeah.
million, 600,000 range in the last 5 years, as far as I can track. So that's why that in the talent shortage, we know that there's a huge gap. And going back into the case studies, hey, we are there first providing the baseline just to understand where we are from a technical point of view. At the same time, we have the separation of duties. We have our subject matter expertise to look at the policies and procedure, third party vendor management. So we can give them a score at that point. And of course, that it can be subject of a lot of different argument. But hey, that's not the point about what score you're getting. It's how
Right.
can we improve? How can we go from from a passive response type of strategy and move the needle to a more proactive and eventually to a more adaptive
Right.
strategy. And
And
that's what we are there for.
yeah, that's really kind of what's needed today, not just on the technology side, but even on the governance side, is an adaptive strategy. You have to be adaptive on the technology side because the advancements in the attack types, but even on the compliance side, the number of rules and regulations and laws that are coming out from around the world. And if you're anywhere in a supply chain, you could be think everything is here in the United States, but somewhere along the supply chain, you touch Europe, you're going to fall into those kind of laws and governance as well. So,
Yeah, and this is the why we need to focus more on the automation now, because the
right.
automations is helping us to do a lot of the work that we have to do manually, like I mentioned about pen testing. And we starting to taking into the automation software and solutions out there 4 years ago. And we went through that duration, so testing it, making sure, and comparing it with our pen test expertise.
Hmm.
And where we're shifting those pen testers' expertise in now is to focusing into what we call the compliance tailoring. Okay, with this particular technical control, what does it address from the compliance, based on our client's requirement,
Right.
like ISO, CMMC, FINRA, you name it. What are the sub-control? In fact, let me show it to you, share my screen, on what we actually try to do with the compliance tailoring. So first of all, we, shifting a little bit about the discussions and going from a data analytic point of view. From the SARA baseline, we have deployed these type of tools. We capturing the statistics, maybe just at one time. But what we are trying to do is moving into now the second steps, professional development. And with the professional development, as a team, we can collaborate with external vendors, subject matter expertise, the client's objective, business objective, translating or interpreting all of that into the defense in depth overview. Now, of course, each organizations, they have their own expertise. They can interpret it any way and shape the way they wanted it. By the way, this is what we call the Unity Risk Indicator. It is an open source, but I'm not going to go into that for
That's a
today.
whole separate conversation.
Whole separate conversations, but all you need to remember is we are vendor agnostic. We try to be unbiased in our strategy, our approach, and including this tactical. That's why we're giving away as an open source. And so your team can take ownership of it and run with it. And then at the same time, that the tactical side is what we try to build with our client as a professional development. So first, the baseline. After we engage, it's a fixed cost. I'm not going to mention the cost. You can call me and call Sean, and we can discuss. And that cost has been deployed at worldwide. Our channels knows it, which includes three of the telcos and maybe dozen of the channel partners in different part of the world, and it is the same, manufacturing such as retail price, we call it MSRP, but we can talk about the pricing. So as a fixed cost, deploy the baseline. Once it's done, then we're taking into the professional development. Or at that point, some of our clients say, hey, we checked the box. We don't need you anymore. Thank you very much. Fine with us. But where we see the value is really on the professional development to derive all the data that you have from your existing IT and technology tools that you have invested currently,
And that's one of the
extracting
important
these type of
things,
data.
Stanley. Sorry.
Go ahead.
What's one of the
Go
important
ahead.
things
Go
is
ahead.
us helping to evaluate, giving that third party assessment of the security tools that you have invested in. Are you maximizing the value from that tool that you've purchased, the license that you've purchased? Is it configured properly? Did you overbuy it because the salesperson was really good at selling you the greatest solution out there? And oftentimes I'm surprised at how often we see people having bought something that the organization really doesn't need because the features that they really need are in a tool they've already purchased.
Right.
And it's all about us helping them find cost savings. And then even on the governance side and the compliance side, really kind of looking at what platform you're using. Are you using a good platform that's going to give you this information you need? But the professional development side is really where we come in and can provide a lot of value to an organization long term in helping their staff maintain the security for the organization moving forward.
Right. So this is the part about going into the compliance tethering related to the GRC.
What
What
does the
where
compliance tethering mean?
we thank you, Sean. So again, acronym, right? What we've been doing, what I have been doing in the last 18 years, we're focusing a lot on the security IT tools. So at the same time, Sean, you just mentioned the point, even though you got the tool, but how are you using those tools? For example, I like to use car as an analogy.
Right.
I got a Ferrari, but I don't know how to drive a manual. So what? So I gave you a Rolls Royce, but you just got them, or you might not even have a driver license. So what? So that's the kind of the attitude now I'm looking in from the technology point of view. Okay, so what when there are so many tools out there? What are they doing? What are they really trying to, besides the technical features and functions that it helps the organizations to address cybersecurity? What else can it do to basically address the company's objective, which we look at it is governance, risk, and compliance. Those are
Mhm.
more important factors because one of our client actually asked me, great, we have this, we have a global SOC. They looking at these tool sets, give us the security incident, but Stanley, none of them align with the governance compliance issues that we need to address at the same time. And sometimes those would cost us more when we get a penalty hit, if we get a penalty from the compliance and regulator. That technical security incident, yes, it helps us to mitigate the technical risk, but it doesn't help us to mitigate the governance and the compliance and regulatory risk, and which are more important for us than the
Right.
technical from time to time. Now, this is where the tethering comes in, the compliance tethering comes in. Okay, so how we help our customers during the baseline, before we deploy the baseline, we ask the clients, okay, what area, this is just an example, what area does your company that you think that you need to comply? So, okay, I got ISO, I got PCI, I got CMMC. So now you get a list of the overview on the controls. So nobody can do it all at the same time. So let's identify what are the ones that we're going to choose. These are the four that we selected. What can we do as in to simplify our operations in kind of like a one stone kill two birds? So if we're going to take this for attribute, the subcontrols, and then we're going to map it into the type of technology tools to start measuring and getting the data out of it. This is where that it makes it operation effective. Then this is our compliance tethering in an early stage form. And of course that these are what I mentioned earlier is the interpretations that you should be sharing, your company should be sharing with your external vendors, internal team, or even third party auditor if possible, to make sure that this description is what we all are looking for. Yes, I know asking for collaboration sometimes can be, pulling teeth. Yes, but at the same time, this is what we believe the industry are lack of: a clear communications, breaking down by the compliance and regulatory into a subcontrol, into a very finite, as finite as it can get. Define these descriptions and even write it with, AI if possible, and adjust it and making sure that everything, and just put it into this dashboard environment, share it with everyone, giving them a time frame, a timeline, making sure are these the objective that needs to be worked on. They got to say yes or no. If no, then they got to work on it and they can contribute into it. And then we've taken it into the tethering. Okay, this particular area might be using a SIM. And this is, I'm not going to click onto it. This is where you connect to your SIM, or your pen test. And if you don't know how to, perform a pen test, these are the recommended vendors. You don't have to contact us. Then giving this type of information for your team, internal or external, to narrow down the communications and start collaborating. And from the collaborations, extract the data and then put it into the completion rate. And it could be a very subjective. Somebody, written a policies and procedures, and you can call that 100% fine. But at least that there is an area that you could start putting all this information into a single pane of glass and start the data analytic journey. And from there, you can maximize the operation effectiveness and maximize your cost efficiency.
That was very clear with one of our clients, as these regulations and laws have become more prolific and independent of each other. There's not necessarily a framework like ISO or NIST, cybersecurity framework might be, but we're now talking about GDPR and California consumer privacy and New York DFS and Colorado privacy. And the US is going to have 50 some different data privacy laws at some point here. And if you operate across the country, you're going to have to comply with multiple laws that aren't exactly the same. And this need for tethering is becoming more and more important.
Thank you, Sean. And of course, these are just continue some statistics to, we all heard about it. As matter of fact, that, sometimes I get tired of watching those news and listening to those news because it's the same thing over and over again. But why we starting SARA is because we want to, from a strategic point of view, from more importantly, from an approach point of view, to
Yeah.
make it easier. We have been doing this for so many years, but we still getting the questions, where do we start? So where do we start? It's just like going back into the GPS. I keep, answering it and say, look, when you want to go somewhere, with your GPS, with your mobile phone, what do? Well, first you turn on that location button so you know where you are at. Same thing. First step, you got to know that your organization. And these could be just basic business objectives, okay, we got to come in compliance with FINRA, CMMC, SEC, whatever that is being picked on. If you don't have any, you know what? Maybe you wasted 45 minutes of your time. So you shouldn't be here anymore. But I doubted it because now almost every business, including some of the small business I have given class on, they have what I refer as the Soho market, small office, home office, maybe a 5 people, a janitor, company.
Yeah,
They are being asked by the larger
yeah,
corporation because they're a janitor company, what are the risks? What do you do in cybersecurity to protect, all the data that you're getting into when you're getting in and out of our office? Might not
right.
be much, but it's still a compliance and regulatory requirement. Well, not necessarily regulatory requirement, but it's a compliance requirement. So baseline assessment. What do we do? Um, Here you go. The GPS,
That's right.
the pin drop. And this is what we do. We can do that in automatically send you a what we call the SARA box. And we loaded all the software in there. You put a jump box in front of it. A just old computer is fine, old laptop is fine. It's just to control the access that nobody gets in and out to the SARA box without your authorization. And I mentioned that we have 3 telcos as our partners. And one of them, we asked them, because they're interested in our, SARA. So we asked them, well, why don't you set up your own appliance so we don't have to ship one over to you because it's in different part of the world. So they did. They set up the box and they have a full team, including their SOC,
Yeah,
watching this test. So after we set up the pen testing, the vulnerability assessment, and the system configuration assessment. So we gave them a questionnaire to fill out. So these are the digital assets that they want to, provide the assessment, blah, blah, blah. So after we got it, we go through the jump box, which, only allow us in at the time that one of the engineer is being in watching every single step on what we do. So after we got into our job, the SARA box, we configure everything, set the schedule, and run it. And they shut down the jump box, so we have no access to the SARA baseline assessment at that point. We haven't heard back from them, after like a month or something like that. And then after a month, then of course they didn't share the analysis, the assessment with us. They want to keep it completely quiet. But the next thing I know, they asked me to fly over there to meet with the whole sales and business development team, the operation team, the engineers, and sign the partnership. That was the only
yeah.
time I met with them and then come back. So we have been doing this. Don't worry, even though we just unviewing Sarah now, you are not a guinea pig. We have tried it for years and we have gained a lot of experience throughout this last 4 years, including a different type of penetration testing tools and vulnerability assessment tools. If you know me by now, I keep telling you, hey, there is an open VAS, which is a open source. Go download it and play with it. And there are open source, over 150 open source type of tools that is available in the market space. Comparing to the commercial, they are from the last statistics I read was like 3,800. So of course nobody can evaluate them all, but what we have done is we continuously evaluating, find the type of tool so we can, what I tell my team is called plug and play. We would look at what is the best value tool set out there based on the functions and the features that they offer, and then fine tune it to the point that we put them together as an integrated platform as a service for measuring and monitoring, which I will go in a little bit more deeper. But start back into the baseline, open source tools or not, it's your team, your resource, how you want to control and manage that. But most importantly is you got to ask the questions to your team. Where are we in cyber resilience maturity? And it would be best to provide a simple score. And then you go back and ask, How do they come up with that score? So that's an easy way to measure it. From that point of view, we're going to further about professional development. Again, I'm not going to go into the details, and please reach out to us. We'll send you a more um, in lengthy deck if you like to read. Then we can send you the white paper, and we have white paper talking about harmonizing cyber risk management, talking about unlocking effectiveness of cyber risk management, and talk about the 4 stages of strategy. And then we talk about the approach with the 3 steps, and then come back to the last point, the iPass, and go back into the 6 principle that we define. And if you would like to challenge us, please feel free.
Yeah.
Share your insight into the cyber risk governance group in LinkedIn, and we love to talk about this and try to improve ourselves. But at the same time, that we have, why we putting this 6 principle together, because of separation of duties. We have got a pretty good size and very in-depth expertise from consulting company to individuals that love and breathe cybersecurity, GRC, you know, in the last 20 years or so. And one of them, I have to give the courtesy and to Mr. Mike Hager, giving us the business impact analysis, which we're going to give it to you. He has over 40 years of experience in this area, and
Mhm.
he loves to help, and he loves to have the conversation just to get you starting with this journey, and then tightening it up based on this iPass, so your organization can look at, based on your budget, do we need a quick start or essential or premium? Look at this 6 principle, what we define, challenge us, define with us, so you can get the best out of your money in the future. Not just a one time to do a baseline assessment and check the box, which we love to do. And we do that, almost on a weekly basis now. But getting into the professional development, and then getting into the measure and monitoring using data analysis, and then providing and up to date, or as close as the real time, depends on what type of engagement that you would like to have. You get a up to date, real time cyber resilience maturity scorecard, and then you can take that and negotiate with your cyber insurance company for the premium that they're charging you, and which we love to help you with that as well.
Yeah, that business impact analysis is a good tool to sit down with your team, your management team, and really kind of go through it and set up exactly where you are with it's going to have some influence. It's going to be opinion in some cases. It's going to have egos trying to be protective of their areas, but it does give you a good starting point without any cost from outside. But just to really put yourself in a position to then say, okay, now I'm interested in a SARA baseline. I need to know and understand the things that I can't see. Going back to that one slide you had, Stanley, with the medical stuff.
Ah,
A business impact analysis is, I can weigh myself at home, I can take my pulse at home, I can go outside and go for a walk and get some exercise, but I still don't really know what's going on inside. I don't know the things I can't see internally, and that's where that MRI or a CAT scan comes into effect to get the baseline, the blood work to get the baseline, and then you're going to see a doctor to get that
how much it's
professional
going to cost me,
development.
Sean? Don't you get that all the time?
Yeah, what's it going to cost me? Well, there's so many different factors that go into what it's going to cost you. You don't know what it's going to cost you to go see that doctor until they tell you you're going to need a surgery of some sort, and it's going to cost this. But all of these
Or how
things
about how about
are.
this, for the audience who put the last 55 minutes without time up to now, if they come back and tell us one word, resilient, Stanley, I give you a great percentage. What is a great percentage? How about 40% of what we're charging? Just mention resilience. I
Why
give
not
you a
50%,
40% off.
Stanley?
All right, all right. Well, but then they think that I'm making too much money at that point. But yeah, 40 50%. I actually we do that for the nonprofit organizations.
Yeah.
We know the school district is hurting, and they lack of personnel, they lack of budget. If you are a nonprofit organization, I will give you
The
50%.
those charitable nonprofits are important to us too because we want to see every money that they raise going to what their foundation is there to do, not to pay a ransom for a ransomware attack or to pay cleanup or to deal with any lawsuits for data privacy violations. So,
Yeah, and well, more importantly, I think that yes, given we are a business, we are not, we need to survive. And why we doing this in the worldwide, the data analytic is becomes more important than just the cyber resilience or cybersecurity or GRC. It is something that for you to go back into just like your health check, you are aware of what's going on at any given time, what the situation about the cyber resilience of your organization. So you can start defining based on your existing resource or future resource how to prioritize to address those risks immediately. And
yeah,
it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to do that. And these are the area why we can actually reduce some of the costs is because we taking the time and effort evaluate those open source and helping customers to put it in place so they don't have to spend a lot of money buying branding, and which I know that a lot of companies spend lots of money building up their brand and they get it back from you. So this is where one thing that we don't do is to you that making you pay for the branding.
yeah,
Nevertheless, this is the part that we continue to take, and the open source, we will try to release it, but we are, doing the best we can based on our resource as well. So we need a lot of case studies to
yeah.
justify it to the community. And that's why we unveiling SARA and to ask you to look into your network and see who can be our case study would be small mid-sized companies who have lots of regulatory issues and limited budget, limited human resources, and want to focus and measure and monitor in the futures to take this journey with us in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months. So that way we can start addressing what the biggest problems would impact to your organizations are the regulations, besides the hackers, which you already know. I don't need to emphasize on that. But now the regulators are coming down and breathing down on our neck. And of course, the cyber insurance is also part of that. Those are the area that we are trying to put this together, the cyber resilience maturity scoring to help everyone in this process. So you
Right.
know how you can become operation effective and cost efficient. With that, 2 minutes, Sean. How can they find us?
They can find us on LinkedIn. They can find me at Sean Mahoney at NetSwitch on LinkedIn. They can find you as Stanley Lee on LinkedIn. They can join our cyber risk governance group on LinkedIn, which is a curated group of risk professionals. If you're not already in the group, that's an area where we try to share as much information amongst each other, but it
And
is
also,
all.
don't forget the YouTube. So
And
NetSwitch
then our
Inc. If you
YouTube.
go into, yeah, and
Yep.
we have lots of expertise. Don't just trust us for it. We've been working with those expertise for the last few years, and they share a lot of great insights and experience on the YouTube as well.
Yep. We have our newsletter, a weekly newsletter. You can sign up for that. And then we do our podcasts where we try to educate people from a lot of different areas within the area of cyber risk and governance, talking to a lot of experts in different areas and what their experience is, things that they have found effective and useful in what they do on their daily jobs to help other organizations so you don't have to waste a whole lot of time
And the
doing your own
private
research.
roundtables.
And those private roundtables we have once a month. That's right. Those are good chances for really an unrecorded, open conversation with other risk professionals to understand whether people are facing and really kind of knowledge share amongst each other. So
Wonderful. Well, right on time. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you taking this hour and watching this video in the future. But mainly that we want you to share the insight. And if you need help, that, hey, remember Sarah can be your help and reach out to us.
And if you'd like the business impact analysis, send us a message on LinkedIn, ask us for the business impact analysis. And if you're interested in evaluating Sarah, seeing Sarah yourself, let us know.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very. Thank you.